In an old brick house on the outskirts of a small town, time seemed to stand still. The dark walls were dilapidated, the stairs creaked, and the air in the corridors was thick and still, saturated with the smell of damp and dust. The residents of the house had become accustomed to its oddities. The dilapidated walls made strange sounds. The old pipes hissed at night, and sometimes the doors closed by themselves due to drafts. But one day, sounds in the attic attracted everyone's attention. At first, these were quiet, barely noticeable rustlings. Someone decided that these were rats, that it was just the wind playing in the empty space under the roof. But soon the sounds became louder. In the silence of the night, you could hear something moving above. At first it sounded like light steps, then like heavy steps of bare feet, echoing on wooden boards. Mrs. Hudson, an elderly woman living on the third floor, was the first to notice something strange. "It's the same every night, like someone's walking over my head," she complained to her neighbors. A young couple from the apartment across the street decided to check the attic. When Jake and Sophie climbed the steep stairs, the attic greeted them with a cold atmosphere. The dim light from the lamp barely illuminated the dusty space, causing long shadows to dance on the walls. But there was nothing unusual, only old boxes, forgotten trunks, and cobweb-covered beams. "Probably rats," Jake said, but his voice sounded uncertain. But the sounds did not stop. Each evening, the footsteps became more distinct, and sometimes they stopped right above someone's apartment. Some residents swore that they heard muffled breathing or whispers, but no one could prove anything. The attic remained empty, each time greeting new guests with silence, but everyone felt there was something there. There were two brothers living in the house, Henry, who was 12, and his younger brother Sam, who was only 8. The boys, having heard stories from neighbors about strange sounds in the attic, could not resist the temptation to solve the mystery. "Ghosts. Maybe it's just the wind," Henry said, trying to sound brave. "Or monsters," Sam added with a nervous smile. At sunset, when the other tenants were busy with their own affairs, the boys made their way to the stairs leading to the attic. The long wooden stairs creaked under their feet, and the air grew colder with each step up. The attic greeted them with the same oppressive silence that had greeted everyone before them. The beams of the flashlight picked out old suitcases covered in a layer of dust and rare pieces of furniture, long forgotten. They settled against the wall, watching the dark space. At first, nothing happened except for the faint howling of the wind coming through the cracks in the roof. But as the clock struck midnight, the silence gave way to a barely perceptible rustling. "Did you hear that?" Sam whispered, clinging closer to his brother. The rustling grew louder, turning into barely perceptible footsteps. It seemed as if someone was moving carefully around the attic, not noticing the boys. "It's just one of the neighbors, probably checking us out," Henry tried to reassure his brother, but his voice was shaking. The footsteps came closer. The boys froze as shapes began to emerge from the darkness. First, it was one silhouette, tall, elongated, with unnaturally long arms that seemed slightly transparent. Then another, and another. The shapes filled the attic, moving slowly, as if they did not notice the children or did not care about them. The shadows slid past, some disappearing into the walls, others seeming to float in the air. Their movements were silent, but their very proximity made the air turn icy. One of the figures froze. It turned, and the boys felt its gaze burning into them. It had no face, but empty black sockets where eyes should have been stared right at them. "Henry," came the whisper. quiet but coming from all directions. Sam squeezed his brother's hand so hard his fingers turned white. The boys couldn't move. The other figures began to stop too, their faceless faces now looking at the children. The whispers grew louder, turning into a chorus of voices calling their names. Henry took a step back but hit the wall. One of the figures moved toward them, its shape seeming to flow out of the darkness. The silhouette approached, slowly stretching out its transparent, long arms. The voices grew louder, as if someone was speaking from all corners of the attic at once. Henry felt the air around him become cold, almost icy. He tried to protect Sam, covering him with his body, but his legs became heavy, as if something was holding them. "Who are you?" Henry burst out, but his voice was drowned out by the chaos of whispers. The silhouettes froze for a moment. One of them, the tallest, tilted his head, as if examining the boys. Then, as if obeying a silent command, the rest of the figures began to move closer, filling the entire space around. When the ghosts were close enough, Henry suddenly saw details. Their clothes were old-fashioned, as if from different eras. One woman in a long dress covered with torn lace fabric held a porcelain doll in her hands. The man with the battered hat, his face covered with deep wrinkles, stood motionless, his eyes empty. They weren't just ghosts, they were people who had once lived here. "You see them?" Sam whispered, his voice shaking. "It's them, the ones who were here before." Henry muttered, realizing that they had encountered those who had remained in this house forever. The voices were clear now, as if each of the ghosts was speaking their own words. They all left. "We stayed. Now you will stay too." The silhouettes began to merge with the shadows, filling the room with thick darkness. The attic no longer looked like an old, dusty room. It had become another world, cold, lifeless, full of echoes and emptiness. The boys tried to run, but every step they took was bogged down by the weight of the air. The cold hands of the ghosts reached out to them, cautiously. When Henry and Sam fell, the last light disappeared. In the morning, Mrs. Hudson, a neighbor, worried about the strange silence, went up to the attic. She found only a couple of flashlights lying next to small footprints in the dust, but the children were gone. The attic became quiet again, but now, if you go up there at night, you can see two new figures among the shadows. They stand closer to the door, as if they had just arrived, and their eyes in the darkness watch for anyone who dares to enter.